The scene unfolds not in glory, but in derision. Across the sun-scorched sands of North Africa and the shadowed forests of Europe, German troops would jeer at the peculiar semi-automatic rifle slung over the shoulders of their American foes. To these battle-hardened veterans, the M1 Garand appeared a lumbering beast, heavy, unwieldy, a labyrinth of mechanisms too fiddly for the front lines. In hasty barracks chatter or hasty jottings in field notebooks, they branded it the plaything of a novice force, unfit for the rigors of true conflict. They placed their faith in the elegant precision of the Mauser bolt-action rifle, a product of generations of Teutonic ingenuity, and sneered at the notion that a land of assembly-line drones could ever grasp the art of warfare. Yet what passed for jest and distant whispers proved fatal when the Garand unleashed its voice on the battlefield. 8 rounds erupted in a swift, relentless cadence, outpacing any frantic bolt cycle. For countless Germans, that final echo was a sharp, metallic *ping* of an expended clip hitting the ground, swallowed by an ominous hush. The irony cut deep. Warriors who had lampooned its clunky form now lay prone in the mud, hands raised in defeat, eyes locked on its unyielding barrel. In diaries seized after the fray, some admitted their raw shock at the American ceaseless barrage, a relentless storm of lead that defied belief. Those scribbled admissions, etched in tight pencil strokes, rang truer than any victor's boast. They had scorned the rifle from afar, only to yield when it stared them down. Picture the stunned march of German captives, seasoned fighters from Rommel's Afrika Korps, disembarking from trains into the verdant heart of America in 1943. They braced for squalor or disarray, but encountered a realm of quiet might. Here, farmers piloted behemoths dwarfing their own panzers. Smokestacks belched fire through endless nights, feeding voracious assembly lines, and GIs wielded a firearm that pulsed with streamlined lethality. The Garand transcended mere armament. It embodied a profound verity. The United States forge of industry was no fable. Thus commences our tale, born in ridicule, shattered by the clash of iron and unyielding fact. These men would linger for years within over 700 POW camps strewn across the American expanse. In those confines, the weapon they once derided morphed into a haunting emblem of their grave misjudgment. What first pierced the prisoners' defenses was not the rifles per se, but the colossal machinery birthing them. 4 souls forged in a rye where coal was doled out in pinches and steel eked from every scrap. The vista of U.S. output lines loomed more dread than any howitzer. In the heartlands of Illinois, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, they spied workshops that slumbered not, plumes of soot ascending at first light, lingering till the witching hour. Rail lines thrummed ceaselessly, flatbeds groaning under crates of stenciled Garands. What took German foundries fortnights to forge poured from Yankee belts in hours. At a Texas outpost, a sentry offhandedly mentioned to a cluster of POWs that Springfield's singular forge churned out hundreds of Garands daily. Nervous chuckles rippled through the group, dismissed as Yankee bluster. Truth dawned later. By 1943, that rate eclipsed 1,000 per day, each vetted, lubricated, dispatched. That figure haunted their quarters, murmured like a spectre amid the bunks. How might the fatherland compete? A pilfered missive from a sergeant captured his vigil at the perimeter fence, eyes tracing a freight serpent laden with shrouded engines, slick with grease. Daily, he penned, they dispatch armaments rivaling our weekly yield. Their war is one of surfeit, ours of want. Resignation laces script, not rage. The human vignettes only sharpened the chasm. POWs marveled at dawn arrivals of the Boers, tin pails brimming with thermoses of Joe, wax-wrapped provender, even fresh produce, to men subsisting on thin gruel and rye crusts. Such fare struck them as princely for peons. A lone apple in a satchel rivaled the Garand symbolism. The pulse of production drummed on. Sleepless nights brought the wail of eastbound locomotives, freighted for seaports. Within those boxes, another Garand bided its thunder. The cadence, shriek, haze, eroded their convictions. Indoctrinated in Aryan preeminence, they now peered from behind mesh at a colossus churning not just arms, but war's very tempo, impervious to creed. The act fades on a tableau, ox leaping in a mill, ricocheting off alloy planks. Legions of souls, men, women, talking fasteners in symphony. The Garand was no lone sentinel. It was the anvil's choir, the stamper's roar, the artisan's toil, synced to a singular throb. And the captives, Voiceless, heard it sharper than salutes. Existence in the enclosures followed a languid beat, far removed from the frenzy beyond the palisades, yet brimming with jolts that upended the inmates' worldviews. Initial stunners hid in mundane trifles. A warden's midday repast, idly unpacked before the wire, brimmed with hearty loaves, creamy curds, smoked vines, a burnished pumice. Teutonic brass traded stays, a gas, that spread out mass frontline allotments for platoons. A lowly trooper grumbled its shielded brass at home, yet here it nourished a gear turner, a sewer, or the sweeper minding the shop floor. Beyond the victuals lay the nonchalance. Captives noted the plenitude of Yankee smokes, fragrant and free-flowing, whirled from the rice-bitter proxies. Whispers flew of wages buying autos on humble pay. Skeptics guffawed at his hype. But as convoys of gleaming chassis rumbled by, mirth soured at disquiet. Quarrels flared in the dorms. Diehards gripped the Führer's fictions, decrying the bounty as illusion meant to break spirits. A rising cadre, fresh-eyed, murmured the proofs were incontrovertible. Salvage journals brimmed with acrid riffs, one infantryman etched a fist nearly flying over a mate branding him quisling for praising the profusion. "How refute our senses?" he vented. Even the hush of some spoke volumes. A corps officer, erstwhile orator of fervor, went wordless post a mill jaunt, beholding sable hands masterminding titanic presses, appending cradle tales of caste. For him, the quiet endured epochs. Pride flickered on, though some scorned the Yankee grind as rote drudgery, bereft of kraut finesse. They vaunted the Mausers' grace, if tardy, yet as rails bellowed on, brags ebbed. A POW. Reminisce gazing through thorns at use at bat ball, mitts, and sticks courtesy of mercy leagues. He evoked fatherland young foraging tinder, lining for loaves. The gulf gnawed deeper than doctrine. Disparities stacked like stockpiles. They jeered the Garands' bulk, yet it steamrolled them in strife. They flouted America as flaccid, yet spied vigor in banal bounty. Reconciliation eluded, but the proofs pressed. The segment seals not on ledgers, but a vista, a god's Nordcore abandoned on a sill, for the taking, a token of a sphere where discards whispered riches. By winter's grip in 1944, the sheds rang with brooding echoes. Marchers of old rigor now paced vigils with frayed wrangles. A few gripped revolt, hissing a Teutonic triumph. Most divined the tide's tone, the fray ebbing from grasp. Resolve splintered in gloaming chills, as hut timbers creaked and far-off rails evoked ceaseless crucibles. In the press, tattled birth avowals. A Nebraska legend nabbed midspat logged 2 lance jacks at odds. One Hawk wonder arms a flip fate. The riposte, what feeds a V2? What outbuilds their bowls? The barb scorched the stockade like brush fire, gutting the gospel. Jarring instants lace routines. A century decanted scalding brew from flask as cues drew tepid mash, the aroma alone stilled tongues. Another gaped at pay slips flaunted sans dread, whilst rye rank starved for stipends months overdue. These peaks at home front poise amid strife gnawed certainties fiercer than fusillades. Fishers rigidified indoors. Zealots, dwindling, pillared peers as cravens. Dust brought stifled tussles, not for scraps, but verity. A handful even drilled English snippets, aping century slang. One inscribed, "It may serve on repatriation. Mayhap this marks not close, but dawn anew." A yarn spun of a salvage band, YMCA furnished, essaying Van Beethoven, tears traced cheeks unseen. Yet even then, Yankee holes pierced the strains, a nudge that as they strummed, democracy's forge hammered. Schisms widened with posts from kin, airmails of pulverized boroughs, famine, young pleading for fuel. The rift twixt ink and vista crushed. One scrawled, "My boy chews beats whilst the watchman's whelp save his citruses. Whose morrow endures?" The act hushes on a hush, scores abed, gazes nailed to beams, each plagued by one query. Had all faith been fraud? By 1945, the Yankee war engine crested. Captives couldn't devote eyes. From Midwest and Southern pens, ceaseless freights growled seaward. Each night whale recalled steel streams of bores, treads, wings. Tallies dazed, over 4 million Garand by armistice, with myriad hulls and birds. The forge of freedom rang no catchphrase, it pulsed, and the men dwelt in its reverberance. An Oklahoma inmate tallied shrieks abed, fancying each box-bound Garand a slug-inbound. Each note a round primed, he acerbated. In another hold, a stripling gawked at kerchief dames riveting hulls with martial thrift. Home, our wives' trench. Here, they birth birds, he breathed to mates. The room fell mute, murmurs wed or to woe. Holdouts pinned hopes on jets or reprisal rockets. But frank tongues wagered the mass was inexorable. A once blustery lieutenant owned in camera, I deem no prole host could fell us. Yet each mallet strikes. Subtler still, the Yankee psyche they glimpsed. Sentries, common folk, chattered of post-war hearths, kin and calm. Such vista tomorrow rattled deeper than ordnance. Rye ward, horizon shrank to breath. Hey, I halt to query you, the reader, which bore heavier on these Teutons, the ceaseless arms torrent, or the irrefutable everyday surfeit? Way in below, the act dims on a potent sight, gloaming rutted by mill flays afar. The sheen mirrored in eyes mashed to mesh, dawning the blaze wrought not ruin, but Genesis, and Genesis sealed dooms. Finale crept not in oratory, but void. Springs thaw in 1945 seeped tidings, the rye crumbling, spires ash, brass yielding. For the captives, stark verity rode not whispers, but Garand moors. The boars once burlesque now at the brink, twixt thrall and oblivion. Barrack law swelled of cohorts dropping steel, as Yanks press measured, Garands leveled firm. One recalled his band, wearied and wasted, lurching to a glade ringed by poised doughboys. No blast, no brandish, the poise sufficed. Mausers tumbled to turf, pride shod with M. Even in holds, pinnacles etched the sting. In an Arkansas yard, a Balker defied edict. Stalemate broke as a warden, serene, hoisted his Garand. No bark, no bellow. The German dropped gaze, complied, and later limbed. Not bore alone, but shorty astern. Ironies hissed too. Some own quiet regard for the design all their own. They grasped the octet's haste, left scant breath for foes to close. Thrift, not form, clinches campaigns. One rast amid peers. They mused the oddity, a prairie lad or motor man wielding such sway. The Garand outgrew stock and barrel. It incarnated we schooling evermen, provisioning sand cease, shored by Titan trade. Yet yield bread not mere gloom. For some, surcease. Strife ceased, the jeered Garand emblem breath granted. Guffaws yielded to quiet, quiet to span preserved. Now, to you, thrust into yield by the self-same tool once scoffed, would shame or thanks prevail? No fresh round loosed? Vent in replies. The act veils on a spectral scene, leaves strewn with solar glint Mausers, heaped tidy, whilst Garand stood sentinel in shore grips. Wars close drained the pen slow, rails retracing inbound trails that ferret hordes to the core. Ritanees to the Heimat bore not the mockers who'd first flouted the Garand. They hold more than routs ghosts, etchings are beheld. Many spoke soft, shunning spotlight. Yet in knots, they owned the might was no flyer, but flesh. Post-war halls of scripts unveil keen musings. One ex-captive dreamed yet of riveters' clamor through halls, trumpeting cannonade in recall. Another evoked dames helming colossi outscaling kraut ironclads, a scar indelible. No hyperbole, but bared souls of psyches tumble beyond field fall. For some, starker shades had not arms or anvils, but banal boons. A Bavarian to his heir, decades on a ward in flaying citrus seared eternal. We vied for penury's throne, he voiced. In their palms, a commonwealth of cornucopia. Not all bent. To shift, some hide hardened, to hush or ote, but legions, greener, bore doubt's germs that burgeoned in peace's west. As poles rooted, these seers of liberty's paradox, might fuse free, oft hailed its writ swift. The Garand lingered as talisman in thought. Earth's clumsy jest, now it's as arbiter, not may arm, but span twixt tumble and ascent, its octets tick not war's beat alone, but forge freeze meter. In after years, in vet hushes, yarns spill confessional. They evoke shed clashes, tireless rails, poems, drags, strains rent by wails. Each tale chipped the once gospel. Each a session ere the writ. The act knots on emblem. A grey-beard in 60s schism Deutschland, cradling a whittled Garand toy from a century at parley. He shelved it not prize, but prompt of sway, shame, and inescapable sooth. Annals of tally triumph in quanta, boars birthed, treads trundled, hosts hurled. Yet for the Teutonic thralls who'd first fled the M1 Garand, the core law whispered personal, perdurable. They hide to bonds crediting Kraut Croft Crown, Rice Rock, the canard of Yankee dandies daunted by all-out fray. Instead, they met a folk alchemizing mills of Malays, toilers of tigers, trifles, a pail, a fag, a pumice, to suasion shafts mightier than payloads. In pen still, ringed in barbs, droves face rifts too grand to slight, sablesmiths bossing gears, dames bolting fuselages, so as reigning behemoths o'er-topping treads, ranks toting bulls bottomless. The Garands swelled beyond war's gear. It's sigil to weave wedding liberty to rigor, profusion to pang. Years hence, some on the breech stem not volleys roar, but home fires hush, rail keen freighting sands to cease, young's glee at diamond, centuries eyeing post-fray dawns. Those vignets clung past field fades. Mayhap the utmost quirk of their trek. Session via not arms brunt alone, but ken that the scorned sphere clutch tomorrow. Thus tolls the Garands ***, not war's knell soul, but chronicles knack to abasing the haughtiest.